Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome aboard to another edition of Orange Weekly, presented by Krause Health. Brent, Nate, Mink with you here from syracuse.com. And Nate, today we are on both the football and the basketball Facebook pages because it is crossover weekend, my friend. The Syracuse football team plays at 4 o'clock on Saturday. As you know, you'll be there in Raleigh covering the game. And then at 5 o'clock, Syracuse Colgate basketball tips off, and both games should be ending just about the same time at 7 o'clock-ish or so. So we've got two worlds colliding here as basketball season well underway, football season coming down the stretch. So we figured, why not talk about both? We're on the Syracuse Orange Sports YouTube page as well. And just a reminder, if you do miss this, we like to do this live about Thursday at 1 o'clock or so. You can find it on YouTube and those collective Facebook pages that we noted. So, Nate, busy times, my friend, and we'll start on the football side of things. Two more chances for Syracuse to firmly clinch that sixth win of the season in a bowl bid, and it starts at NC State on Saturday. But before we can take a step forward to that game, some final thoughts on the Louisville game. You know, you were there and had a lovely meal at the Vincenzo's, I believe it was called, right, in downtown Louisville?
Yeah. Let me just back up for a second. I have my headset on tonight to be able to control air traffic control headset so that I can navigate the football and basketball discussion seamlessly this afternoon. So making sure we're on the same
orange cone things that they use.
Getting on the same page. Vincenzo's was great. I mean, it was right in kind of the heart of downtown. Our lovely photographer Dennis Nett and I had a lovely meal. It's
excellent.
It's a nice little date spot down in downtown Raleigh. Fine Italian food, probably akin to what you would get at Francesca's or Joey's or something up in this part of town.
Well, that was the highlight of the weekend because the football game certainly wasn't a fun one to watch. A break from all the heart stoppers that you've covered this year. Let's just step back to that game quickly. Were you surprised to see Syracuse lay that kind of egg against Louisville, knowing everything that's on the line? I mean, football's football. You never know what you're going to see when the game kicks off. But I was surprised to see Syracuse lose in the manner that they did.
It was a lot like my carrot cake, very soft performance from Syracuse that day. That's probably what surprised me most, is that this team all throughout the season was running the ball on everybody, even Clemson at the Carrier Dome. And they were running the ball on people when they didn't have certain pieces up front that they didn't have, in that Louisville game. They still rushed for 300 yards at Virginia Tech and got into the 40s in that particular matchup. So, yeah, it came out flat. Dino, his approach, he kind of telegraphed it going into the game. They didn't do a lot of practicing that first week that they had off. They allowed the guys to rest up, physically get their legs back under them. And the thinking was that by doing so, you'd be able to come out fresher and you'd be able to be more physical against the Louisville team that had been coming off a really, really tough loss and a really, really physical matchup against Clemson. And for whatever reason, it's kind of like the antithesis happened, right? Louisville came out ready to go, ready to swing, and Syracuse, really from that first drive, you saw it, right? I mean, Louisville gashed them for a couple of chunk plays on that opening possession, really had no trouble running up and down the field, getting some early points on the board. It reminded me, Brent, a lot of, and I know there had been some eyesores, last year and even at the tail end of the 2019 season, that BC game in particular, but it was really the first time I thought they came out flat and just not ready to play since that Maryland game in 2019 when they were coming off, the 24-0 win against Liberty in the opener.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of good vibes swirling around the program back then too. The thinking was maybe that if they had handled their business against Maryland, they'd get game day in Syracuse for that big Clemson game that was sold out at the Dome. And, they ended up losing by almost 40 points that day down in College Park. Similar kind of game again in Louisville. It's been somewhat of a house of horrors for them since they joined the ACC. They haven't really been competitive against the Cardinals in Kentucky since they joined the league. Now, a lot of that has to do with Louisville and the talent that they've piled up under Bobby Petrino and now Scott Satterfield. You know, they've had two really, really gifted quarterbacks that can do some damage with their legs, needless to say, and both of them were in the building. You know, both of them were in the building on Saturday.
Yeah, it was Lamar
They only had to play one, but you know, you could tell that Louisville, you know, they were playing for postseason. They were kind of controlling their postseason fate too, and they had a festive atmosphere with Lamar back, and you could just tell that they came out in a much better state of mind, mentally ready to go.
Well, I think you said it, that maybe John Wildhack should petition the league to play Louisville another time of the year. It feels like every time they go to Louisville, it's always late in the season, November, and there's just something about that makes it that house of horrors that you mentioned for this team, because these games have not been close when they go to Louisville. And yeah, what the talent and the quarterbacks that they have has a lot to do with that, more than, you know, the schedule. But maybe they can mix it up a little bit and put Louisville at the front end of the ACC schedule next time around when they go on the road, as opposed to the back end of things. So,
I mean, I will say when Louisville played them in September, that was the game Lamar had like 600 yards of offense in the Carrier Dome and leaped over a defender, and they lost by 40 points that game too. But it would be great to go to Louisville. Yeah, it would be great to go to Louisville in sometime earlier than November, just to maybe sit outside, get some sunshine on your face, maybe take in some of the pony show across the street at Churchill Downs while we're waiting for kickoff on Saturday. But
there you go. By the way, this Lamar leap you speak of, he jumped over a Syracuse player. I haven't seen that replay 85 times since last week. I do not know what you speak of there, Nate. The Lamar, they should make a statue of the Lamar leap at this point. That
they might make a statue of that. They actually, because the whole day was centered around Lamar, they had a silhouetted image of that leap on the video board throughout the game. And I guess you're allowed to do that. You know, there's a lot of interesting history. There's a lot of interesting history that leak. There was a legal dispute with the photographer locally that took that image, and Lamar using that image for, you know, his purposes, and you know, there's a good story there with that leap. That leap has definitely grown in folklore over the last 5 years.
For sure. So Dino Babers comes to his press conference this week and says that Tuesday's practice, and I'm sure Wednesdays and Thursdays and Fridays might fit this category too, would be very interesting for this team. And he certainly wants to see him play tougher, to scratch, claw, hit. I expect this team to play better in that department, certainly against NC State. And maybe we'll see a couple of wrinkles out there to get that passing game going, Nate, because look, we knew eventually somebody was going to slow down the Sean Tucker train to the point where he just wasn't dropping 150 yards like it's nothing. He's only a few yards away from setting the single season rushing mark. He'll get that at some point, probably in the first quarter against NC State. But this is an NC State team to kind of take a step forward to that game, Nate. Top 15 rush defense in the country, which, by the way, both NC State and Pittsburgh fall in that category. So you got two teams that can stop the run. Syracuse has combined for 96 yards passing in the last two games from Garrett Schrader. Syracuse has a good defense in terms of pass rush by numbers, but I feel like they're going to have their best overall day, you know, pass rushing the quarterback. Devin Leary works out of the shotgun a ton. He gets rid of the ball very quickly. He's got a great arm, 29 touchdowns, 5 interceptions this year. I think this is the Devin Leary NC State fans have been kind of waiting for. And this is going to be a challenge for Syracuse in every way, back on the road in this matchup. And, you know, look, ideally, if you want to pick between NC State and Pittsburgh on which team you can beat, NC State would probably qualify, though Pittsburgh might be in a different frame of mind next week if they've got the Coastal wrapped up. I mean, one way or the other, Kenny Pickett wants to put up numbers for the Heisman and just finish out the year strong. So look, no matter how you slice it, Nate, it's not going to be easy in these next two games for Syracuse to get that coveted 6th win they're looking for.
No, I think you make a lot of great points. A lot to unpack there. You know, first of all, I think going back to NC State, the job there, they really have a couple of second-year defensive coordinators that have made a pretty significant impact on their program. and this is the year. Obviously, they both came in ahead of the COVID year, and then the COVID year was a mess for a lot of folks. But this is the year that now they have kind of like the staff here in Syracuse, the coordinators here in Syracuse, that full year under their belt to really get with their guys for a full off season. You're starting to see some big time improvements on both sides of the ball from NC State. NC State has had just a run of bad injury luck, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. Again, this happened a couple years ago in 2019, and they spiraled into a 4-8 season, and they won one league game, and Syracuse went down. That was the last time Syracuse was down there, and it was that ugly 16-10 game at night when DeVito showed up with that huge pad over his ribs, and just not a great football game to take in that day in Raleigh. But no, Tony Gibson, the defensive coordinator at NC State, has done just about as well a job as I think he could have done given the circumstances. They lost Peyton Wilson, who was maybe the preseason ACC Defensive Player of the Year, or one of the top defensive players in the conference coming into this season. He's done for the year. They've had Isaiah Moore, who had been playing at a really high level after Wilson was out. He was done for the year. They've had just Cyrus Fagan, a one-time transfer from Florida State. He's done for the year. They've had a number of injuries, and to be able to still post up a top 15 rush defense without really, and they've had some injuries up front on their defensive line, but they don't have, that game wrecker or that eraser across the defensive line that we're accustomed to seeing North Carolina State roll out there year over year under Dave Dorr. They, in recent years, they've had, a Liam McNeil, they've had a Contavious Street, they've had a Bradley Chubb. They've had a Murchison. They've had BJ Clark.
Good run of players. Yeah.
BJ Hill. Excuse me. They don't have that alpha dog necessarily, but they have a good rotation up front still. They have good depth. That speaks to the recruiting that Doran and his staff have done down in NC State. And again, for them to, they haven't gotten blown out all year either. NC State. I mean, their losses have been to Mississippi State. They obviously lost a 3-point game to Wake Forest last year, and yeah, that game was in the 40s. But if you actually look a little bit deeper at the numbers, NC State got a lot of stops on Wake Forest last week, and Wake likes to play up tempo, and that's ultimately what done them in. But NC State is stout defensively. I mean, the other side of the ball, they have they definitely have the best offensive lineman in the ACC. They have perhaps the best offensive lineman in the country in Ike Ekwonu at left tackle. He's going to be a high draft pick. He's just an absolute force. He's going to be an All-American. He might win the Outland Trophy for the best interior lineman in college football this season. But again, injury. They've had some injury problems up front, and Ike can't block all 5 spots. So maybe the most surprising thing about this NC State team is they have not been able to establish any sort of running game consistently all year that we expected them to. They have 2 really, really good tailbacks in Z Knight, who's also going to be used in the return game, and they have Ricky Person. They're last in the ACC in rushing offense. So they have really struggled to run block, pass pro. Complete opposite story. They've given Leary time. They've given him a clean pocket. I think he's only been hit or sacked 15 times this season.
Wow.
And the numbers back that up. He's completing well over 60% of his passes. He's up near 3,000 passing yards. 29 touchdowns. I think 5 picks. I mean, that is Kenny Pickett territory.
I was going to say,
from Leary, and no one's talking about him. Because NC State is kind of out of it in the Atlantic. I mean, they're not mathematically out of it, but that loss last week was a killer to their title hopes. But again, if you watch that tape, he probably outplayed Sam Hartman at Wake Forest last week. So arm talent wise, Leary's really good. He didn't play in last year's game. He had the broken leg, but he was an Elite 11 guy out of New Jersey, like Tommy DeVito was the year after DeVito came out of New Jersey. Syracuse wanted him. Syracuse recruited him. He went down to Raleigh, and you're right. This is the year a lot of people are sitting on for him, and he's taken advantage of it, and he's got a big target out on the perimeter in Emeka Emezi, who I think we saw the play he made last year, that catch over, I believe, Melifonwu in the end zone that ended up, in a close game, ended up being one of the difference making plays in that game. He's still out there. So they got weapons offensively, even though their ground game hasn't taken off yet. They can do both, and they can do both well.
Well, Nate, you mentioned Tommy DeVito there. That brings up another interesting topic around the Syracuse football team. The transfer portal came up again a couple of times this week. Over the weekend, Dylan Markowitz, who was a quarterback we had not seen a lot of, he decided to enter the transfer portal. And then a strange one a couple of days later from the standpoint of there's only 2 games left in the season. This is somebody who did play, and that's linebacker Jeff Canton-Arcou, who had 43 tackles this season. He's on the field a lot, of starter at one point at linebacker, because typically these things are about playing time, right? Tommy DeVito was not getting playing time, wanted to use his last year of eligibility somewhere he feels like he could play. Taj Harris saw the offense changed a different direction, wanted to maintain 2 years of eligibility in his case. He decides to go somewhere else, and we already know that destination. He's going to play at Kentucky next year, right? So most of the time, Nate, this is about playing time. Jeff Canton-Arcou, he'll get to tell his story, but he had been playing. But it just speaks to the fact, and I actually asked Dino about this in a radio interview I did with him that will air on ESPN Radio on Thursday if you want to listen to it. And I said, you basically just have to now expect this. You have to build this in quickly. Like, this has become normal in the snap of a finger of what the transfer portal does and the opportunities that it offers these players. But everybody's got a different story, and people will look at Syracuse like, oh my God, 8 guys have left the team, 6 in the portal and 2 that just left. But Nate, look around college football now. Does everybody have those kind of numbers? No, but it feels like if you haven't lost a few players to the portal at this point, then you're the odd one. Whereas before, it was kind of the opposite theory.
No doubt, no doubt. I think someone's got to be first, and if you're first in this particular category, it does, you can't ignore it. It does grab eyeballs. It does grab headlines, and there probably are questions that are reasonable questions and fair questions to ask about, why this is happening, to the extent it is. Now, I think everything you said is still true. Oftentimes this does come down to playing time, and even in the case of Canton, I should preface this by saying, I have not spoken with him. I have not spoken to anyone in his inner circle or his camp. So, do not take this as gospel. But yeah, he was a rotational linebacker. He was on the field. Um, but if his goal is to get to the league and he's not starting, and he looks at the 3 guys who are starting and are on the field a bunch and who are in front of him, they all have eligibility and they're all expected back next year. So, I think, these are personal decisions, and guys need to do what is in the best interest for them. And it's a transitional period in college sports. Coaches are clearly getting acclimated to this and adjusted to this. This is a different, somewhat. I don't know who tweeted it out, but there's that photo of Dino sipping water on the sideline down in Honolulu, at the
Yeah,
University of Hawaii, that
yeah.
popped up today.
Random
Um,
college athletes, not so random to us, but that was the Twitter account that put that out.
but I think it's worth remembering, like, that is the era a lot of these coaches grew up in, and this is the sport, and that is the sport that they remember and they know so well, and it's a totally different ball game. It's a totally different ball game when that rule kicked in the spring, this past August, April. Um, guys can go, and guys are exercising that freedom. It's kind of like the new in vogue trend in college football, and in college athletics, particularly the 2 big revenue sports. And this is gonna hurt roster depth at a place that hasn't really been in a good place with its depth to begin with for a number of years.
That's right.
Um, so this is an alarming thing that is happening, and again, it's just the rules of the game. It's the breaks of the game, but you can only bring in so many guys every year, and the majority of the guys you're bringing in are going to be high school seniors and freshmen. You can dip into the transfer portal, absolutely, but the majority of your roster turnover year over year is going to be high school recruits, and that those are young players that at a place like Syracuse are going to need time to mature and develop and get ready to play as upperclassmen. And now you have this paradox where if guys aren't playing as much as they want to early, they're not going to be shy about leaving and going find somewhere that they can play. So, this is a tough spot to be in. And this is not a surprise to anybody in the program that this is hard. This is they know what they're getting into with this. But it's for a fan base that obviously wants to see more W's than L's. This is going to be tough to swallow, because while you do feel good about the Tuckers and the Schraders and the Michael Joneses and the Marlowe Waxes and the Deuce Chestnuts, those are great players, and you can win with those players. But this is also a sport of surviving and being able to get through the year healthy. And as we've seen year over year, when the injuries start piling up, your team dramatically changes, and it's hard to win games.
The transfer portal is a good way to bridge into the basketball conversation, Nate, because Cole Swider has come into this men's basketball team, and he's a transfer, but it looks like he's been there for 2 years. He's comfortable in the system. Jim Boeheim after one of the preseason games said, and he can shoot, and he can shoot, and he can shoot. He can do that, but that game he played the other night for Syracuse in their second game of the season, he stole the ball. He had 5 assists. He rebounded a little bit. He played very good defense, zone defense or not. That kid showed that he can defend him, and he's 6'8", so he's going to take up some space no matter where he is in the zone. It shows you that this is how the transfer portal works. Now, it's very, very early in the process here, but Kadari Richmond hasn't exactly been putting up huge numbers at Seton Hall. Quincy Guerrier has not made quite the impact maybe he thought he would at Oregon yet. And again, I want to stress that it's early and they'll get acclimated and get in there. But Cole Swider comes in and looks great. I mean, I would expect Jimmy Boeheim to succeed at Syracuse, just given, all the connections there. He's been around the program his whole life, but he still had to get used to playing at Syracuse as opposed to watching games at Syracuse. And the natural chemistry he has with Buddy and knowing these guys, that helps, right? But so far on the basketball side of things, the transfer portal has been a success because of the instant impact, particularly of those two players. Symir Torrance has gotten a little bit of time so far. I think he could be a nice compliment to Joe Girard when Girard gets into foul trouble or he's not shooting well or something of that nature. So that's really been the story of this basketball team so far, Nate. I mean, we knew they were going to shoot well, and they have. They're 50% from three-point range so far on the season. They're not going to maintain that level, but they've been great from distance. Jesse Edwards, I think, has been markedly better in the paint. Everybody's kind of had their turn, either scoring a lot of points or looking good out there. But that instant impact of what Swider and Jimmy Boeheim bring to this team make them pretty exciting.
Well, I guess I would turn it like this. Think about where Syracuse men's basketball sits in the pantheon or the hierarchy of
That's right. Yeah.
prestigious college basketball programs, vis-a-vis where Syracuse football right now is stationed in the Power 5 food chain in college football. Totally different, almost an A to Z type situation. Maybe it's D to V,
There you go.
in that scale.
Yeah.
In that scale. But Syracuse basketball is as close to a proverbial quote unquote selector school. They're going to be able to get and draw in really good transfers, and Syracuse football has to be a little bit more selective, a little bit more due diligent in who they target, who they think they can get. Of course you would like to get the best available players in the transfer market, but the best available on the football side is a little bit more down that pecking order than the best available
That's right.
on the men's basketball side. And Swider came from Villanova. He was a great player coming out of high school. Like Boeheim, like you mentioned, obviously, literally grew up in that system, grew up under that household and that roof, and just knows the ins and outs of what's expected in that defense and that zone and how Syracuse plays. That makes a big difference. That makes a big difference, being able to draw in good players. And you're right. I think, this basketball team, I think, is deep. They're deep at forward. They got multiple guards that they can play. They have a couple of centers, not just Jesse. I think Frank in the early going here has shown that he's going to be a contributor this year and is just very, very much in control of his body. Um, this they should feel good about how they've looked in the early portion of the non-conference schedule. And these upcoming games, Nova at the Garden and Georgetown down in DC and Indiana at the Dome, and next week down in the Bahamas. I mean, those are going to be very, very good measuring sticks about perhaps what the ceiling of this team can be this year.
Well, and I think it actually, Drexel is a team that I think is going to end up in the NCAA tournament. They gave Syracuse a run in the first half before the Orange kind of turned it on and played much better defense. Colgate, our friend Don Dakota, wrote a great piece about Colgate that people should read today. Now, I know they lost the other night. They kind of slipped on a banana peel and lost to Cornell. They went like 6 of 32 from 3-point range, which I think was a big part of that. But they've got Jordan Burns back, who is one of the best players in the Patriot League. They've actually got 2 big centers, 2 of the bigger players Syracuse will face in the stretch of games that you brought up, Nate. A lot of experience. Colgate's been in the NCAA tournament 2 out of the last few years here. They've got a great head coach. They're going to give Syracuse a little bit of a challenge on Saturday as football and basketball cross over. And then you said it. You go to the Bahamas where you could see Baylor, you could see Connecticut, you could see a number of good teams depending on how the bracket shakes out. Their first game against VCU, I think they should handle. VCU's been great in recent years, but they lost a lot of players from last year and they're kind of rebuilding. You come back from the Bahamas, and I was watching Indiana play St. John's last night, and they had a pretty impressive win against the Johnnies. Indiana at home. Then you brought it up, that run where Georgetown's on the schedule again. Villanova's a top 5 team right now, where Cole Swider came from. You got to play them at the Garden. Oh, by the way, Florida State is wedged in there. Let's get an ACC game in there early in the schedule. And Florida State's a top half ACC team. So as Coach P used to say, Nate, the hottest fire makes the strongest steel. And, Syracuse is starting to dip their toe into that fire now.
Yeah, they are. It's this is going to be good. You want to be challenged. This is like the Izzo model in the non-conference. You kill yourself in November and December, and then it hardens you and gives you nothing. Come March, nothing surprises you anymore. You've been battle tested to an extent that you hadn't been in a long time. So, the other thing I'll say is the league looks up for grabs. Virginia has had a couple clunkers early in the non-conference schedule. Duke. Off the court issues notwithstanding, they are Duke, but Carolina's struggled in a couple games. It wouldn't shock me to see this team make a run towards the top of the league this year.
Wouldn't stun me at all. So it is going to be a busy day Saturday, folks. The football game starts at 4:00. There's actually a women's basketball game a couple hours before that. The men's basketball game starts at 5. We got you covered. Just keep it on syracuse.com. Follow our Twitter feeds between Nate, myself, and a number of people that will be on the football side of things. Our friends Mike Waters and Donna Dakota on the basketball side of things. We got you covered. We'll just keep you updated. It's going to be a little helter-skelter for a while there, but we're looking forward to it. It's going to be a busy day. Nate will be there at NC State. Looking forward to all your coverage from Raleigh, Nate. Keep us updated on the dining situation as well. In Raleigh, barbecue. You got to go barbecue when you go south, right?
It's already we got the dim sum reservation for Friday night at
okay.
Brewery Bavard. It's they brew their own beer and then they have dim sum and they also have books and sell flowers there. It's in November you go big or go home in November.
That's right.
There is no Applebee's in November on the road or Waffle House. I will say, it should be easier to find the game this week after a run of Network / how the heck do I stream this or find this on a streaming device? This is going to be an ACC network game, so it should be much easier to find.
Well, thank goodness I missed all those Food Lion commercials, so they'll be back. And we'll be back with you on post game following that game. All right, so keep it tuned. I'm going to be on football duty on Saturday, so we'll do kind of a normal football coverage and then the post game show to follow on some of these similar channels you're watching and on the Syracuse Orange Sports YouTube page as well. Thanks for watching Orange Weekly today. Nate, thanks for hanging with us once again. Always appreciate it, my friend. Again, we do this live Thursdays about 1 o'clock or so, but if you miss it, we'll send it out on our social media channels. You can find it on a link on syracuse.com as well, and subscribe to our Syracuse Orange Sports YouTube page, and you can watch a replay of Orange Weekly and all of our post-game shows presented by Krause Health when you want. Nate, have a great time in Raleigh, everybody. Thanks for watching today. We'll catch you next time here on Orange Weekly.